Hello, my name is John Reynolds. Welcome to Extraordinary Life Stories. On this episode, I'm talking with filmmaker and spoken word poet Tomos Roberts, aka Tomfoolery. Tom's talent and passion rose to prominence with 2020's The Great Realisation, which has now attracted over 100 million views. Tom's world of working in live entertainment was literally taken away from him in lockdown. He pivoted and was inspired to write The Great Realisation whilst homeschooling his 7-year-old brother and sister. The relatability of his poem clearly resonated in such troubled times to give hope to a world that was paused. I want to know what Tom is up to next, so let's find out. Tom, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me, who is Tomos Roberts?
Gosh, a restless storyteller, I would say. Quite curious, adventurous, and very enthusiastically foolish.
Hence, Tomfoolery.
Yeah.
Take me back to a young Tom growing up. Who and what were your early influences in kind of life and career decisions?
I've always been fascinated by people who can tell stories well, by people who can, particularly through the use of language, who can hold and maintain the attention of others. When I was little, I really wanted to be a stand-up comedian because from my perspective, they were among the most daring and risky and cutting edge and honest of people. They're great canaries in the coal mine. Your society's tilting a bit. It's getting a bit wobbly when comedians start getting safe.
Was there anyone in particular that inspired you?
I love Dave Chappelle. I used to watch a lot of Dave Chappelle, but there's so many people. It's like asking your favorite musician. Ali Sadiq is one of the best storytelling comedians. There are so many.
Sure.
But it was an art form that I thought, that they have nothing. They have none of the effects. Very, very rarely do they have, the smoke and the sound and the circus of it all. It's just them. It's just them with a microphone and people listening, and it's the purest form of just being entertaining and speaking to people and telling stories. And I was fascinated by that. And I was growing up in a time, I'm only 30 years old, but there wasn't YouTube when I developed this interest. So, it was really hard. It was really hard to find where you could see people doing these things. And yet, it's all I wanted. And then I remember when I got to secondary school, I discovered that you could watch rap battles on YouTube. And that changed everything.
So watchable as well, isn't it? I've done that. Yeah.
It changed everything because I got to secondary school and I was about this much shorter than everyone else in my year. And I went to a state school in South London that wasn't particularly very nice. And I got there. My primary school was a state school, but it was quite a nice one. And my secondary school was brand new and no one knew anything about it. And I got there and instantly I looked around and thought, okay, I could very easily have trouble here, and I don't want to. And I want to navigate, this experience of growing up, and I can't physically compete. I can't physically defend myself as well as that 6 foot rugby playing guy
into different strengths.
No, and so I discovered rap battles on YouTube, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is how you do it. You do it with wit, and you do it with humor, and you do it. There was a group in my school who every break time would stand and would rap battle, and they always let me in because I was funny, and because I used to study these guys on YouTube doing it. In the UK, we had Don't Flop. In America, there's Smash URL. In Canada, it's King of the Dot. And I used to watch hundreds of hours of these guys doing that. And then you go to school and you've prepared some funny rhymes about someone's trainers or their backpack or their mum. And instantly, it was an arena where you could compete and you could be as cutting or as witty or as mean as you could. And as long as it rhymed,
it was ring-fenced.
That's
amazing.
And that was incredible.
So school was about everything outside of the lessons for you guys. It was the watching in the evening. It was then like waiting for the lesson to finish to get out into the playground and work your craft.
Well, I mean, the setup of not just British schooling, but the setup of schooling is very difficult for anyone with boundless energy. I loved drama class because you were allowed to blooming stand up and walk around and move.
Yeah, 100%.
Whereas oh my goodness, how often in the lessons where you have to sit in the spot and you're not allowed to, make fun, and you're not allowed to talk, and you're not allowed to get up and move. I found that to be very restricting. And I'm very lucky, I'm sure we'll get onto it, but I get to go into lots of schools now. I've been to more than 500 schools, and schools there's actually no such thing as a school. They're all different, every single one. Every single school I've been to is completely different. And, I've been to some of the richest schools in the country where, our next prime ministers are likely, in the room, and I've been to some of the toughest, roughest, most inner city schools, and we've got this idea that we've got this education system in this country, and that's not true. That's not true. We've got wildly different babysitting, and
it's very well put.
And it's really unfair. And actually, you've got individuals who can't understand why they're being forced through a system that doesn't make any sense to them. And I was one of those kids, and I
was too.
Playtime.
Amazing.
Rap battling.
And not just that, you love playtime, but you work so hard now. You were working hard then outside of school because school wasn't stimulating you. Completely. So I'm 46, you mentioned you're 30, so go back to my childhood and probably many people before us that were unstimulated and were sort of labelled lazy because I was looking out of the window. I was fidgeting. I couldn't wait for sport, I couldn't wait for other things, and then I'm told in my reports that I'm disobedient and I'm not engaged and so on. I'm thinking, but I'm so motivated, I just can't channel it. So you going into schools must be inspirational.
It's incredible. So in February of this year, this is a very small tangent, I was in New Zealand, which is where I was born. And I try and go back every 10 years to see what's happening. And this is the first time I've been to New Zealand in my life since this poetry career emerged for me. And I went to this school in New Plymouth called the Green School New Zealand. And I mean, it's like, it's hard to both at the same time be happy for these children, but also lament for all of the people that don't have this formative experience. Every Wednesday is Nature Day. Every Wednesday they take the children into the forest and teach them about what's around them and how to plant things and how to make music and how to sustain agriculture and these kind of things. And I just think, how many kids do we diagnose with ADHD and fill them full of medication in this country and say, why can't you sit still? And it's obscene. And
so many of the mental health issues that are abundant now in life start in kids. And if you've got no way of actually helping them at that age, and then there's no prevention, what hope does the generation have of getting past what is a mental health crisis?
A mental health crisis, and we scratch our heads and we think, what on earth could cause this? But let's fill them with sugar. Let's nail them to their seats. Let's tell them all that they're ill in some way or another. Let's lock them inside for 2 years.
And teach them how to use a Bunsen burner, which you'll never use again.
Put a mask on. Why don't you know Pythagoras? It's like, the mental health crisis that we're experiencing in this country, it's actually a signal. It's a signal. It's not something that is supposed to just be medicated away. It's supposed to make us so frustrated. It's a signal that there is something fundamentally rotten in the state of Denmark, to quote Shakespeare. There's something going wrong, and this is how it's manifesting. And actually, the smartest minds think, what SSRI can we prescribe to these kids? And I'm thinking, it's crazy.
Smartest minds in the position of making these decisions that aren't working. I mean, we're home tutoring our youngest daughter, who is an absolute force of nature, who cannot sit still in school, is totally unstimulated from an academia point of view, but by home tutoring, not homeschooling. So we're not teaching her, teachers are coming in. She's 13 and she's GCSE level. She's smashing it. And she horse rides every afternoon and she's out with nature doing the things that I wish I'd done, because we've broken the stigma because it wasn't working. But your kids have to go to school, or do they? And so it's an educational thing. I think the curriculum's archaic. It didn't work for me, and I was being a hypocrite, which I've never been. I've to relate to your journey, I sort of went through the journey of getting your exams and then thinking you've got to get a job and then thinking this isn't for me. So I had a much later journey into entrepreneurship and following my passion, which is talking to someone like you from a lived experience. One thing I can get from you mentioned that comedian owning the stage, your charisma, your presence, the whole from facial expressions to tone. Did you teach yourself that? Because you don't learn that in school, right?
That's a very kind compliment.
But it's a genuine compliment, but also to then turn that into storytelling and to be able to marry the whole thing to filmmaking. You know, I want to know how you piece that all together. Through passion, of course, but how you actually learned all that.
Repetition and being terrible at it. I was 14 years old and my school was having an evening of words and music. And I knew that I should sign up because I was terrified. And any time you're that scared to do something, it's a signal. It's saying you've got to have a go. And you know, I'm no singer and I'm no dancer, and I can play the clarinet to a maybe 14-year-old standard. But I thought, okay, I want to partake in this evening, and there's going to be about 200 parents and teachers and students in the audience. And I was a stranger to public speaking, a complete stranger to public speaking. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write a poem. And it was the first time I can consciously track sitting down. And I'm sure I'd written little poems before that, but it was the first time I can track sitting down with one objective, which was to turn a thought or an idea, to distill it into 2 minutes of spoken word that I could get up in front of these parents and teachers and deliver. And you know, of all the memories that you have in your life, this is one of the clearest for me. I remember what it was like before doing it. I had my little words printed on a piece of paper, which is terrible if you're nervous because your little hand will give you away, and that paper will absolutely flap like it's trying to lift you off the floor. And
it's a prop though, right?
Oh my goodness! My little hand's shaking, my little legs are shaking, and I get up, my throat is dry, and I walk onto the stage and I speak this poem. That I'd written, all about jealousy and contentment was the theme. It's called Two Mice. I luckily in 2021 worked with an animator, and we animated, because it was the first poem I ever wrote, we animated it, and it's on my YouTube
sentimental
channel.
to you, right?
Very sentimental to me. And I got off stage, and the adrenaline was the most potent drug I'd ever felt. And actually to this day is the most potent feeling of rush of energy. And all I knew is whatever that is, I have to spend my entire life trying to become masterful at that thing, you know, and trying to do anything I can do to improve and to hold people's attention, whether that's to film yourself performing and spend a week just thinking about your gesticulation and what you were doing with your hands and what you were doing with your feet. You know, and when did you pause, and when were you too rapid, and all of these things. And through constant trial and error and trying to raise the bar on yourself of, you know, you perform for family and friends, you perform in an open mic night. I did that for about 7 years anonymously with no social media profile from 2000 and pretty much from the time I left school until the pandemic. I was doing open mic nights around London and Manchester. And it was incredible. And people would come up to you afterwards and say, I really enjoy that. Where can I follow you? And I go, you absolutely can't, but did you have a good night tonight? I'm like, that's great. I'll come.
But that was your training ground as
well,
right?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Because I watched the Remembrance poem that you did.
Oh, thank you.
And just listening to you then, and how you almost sort of, I don't want to call it a drug, but that feeling you got, that natural high, the endorphins you got when you first got that feeling. I felt when I was watching you that you having that again, and that's really recent. That was this year, 2024.
Yeah.
You know, so do you still get that? Do you still get it? Because you're creating something new each time, and you go into that environment, and you've worked out all the different mannerisms and delivery, and you looked so present in that moment. And of course, it zooms out all the people that are there in front of you, and all the dignitaries, and it goes right into your face, and you just own it. You deliver it in a way that's like he is so in the moment. He's so enjoying that as well. Do you then still get that kind of buzz afterwards?
Undeniably, and it's why the you know, the real problem with social media is you can be so grateful to social media and this tool for all that it allows, and the amount of people globally that it lets you connect with, and the amount of opportunities it can harness for you, and all of these things. But the cold, hard truth of the matter is, you feel alive speaking to 100 people. But if you make a video and post it on social media and it tells you 100 million people have watched that video, it doesn't translate. It doesn't translate. We will always need to perform live for people. This is why the pandemic was such a difficult time for live performance and for connecting with real people. And it's why I'm so glad that you host your podcast and I can sit here and I can look at you and you're not chucked me on a Zoom where we're both really speaking to our cameras and low-key looking at the little pictures of ourselves to make sure we don't look silly.
There's a pulse, there's a vibe.
There's a pulse, there's a vibe, and where there's no lag and there's no delay, and it's real, and that's how it is when you perform live.
It's interesting because you can't replace that, and that sort of, not reverence, but that feeling you get with a connection from an audience, whether it's one person or 50,000. But actually it's social media that gave you the opportunity probably to almost go back to what you love doing and doing more of, because in the pandemic, you effectively gave the nation and the world hope, with the Great Realisation. How did that come to be, that inspiration for it? And you just seem to nail how so many people were thinking. It was almost a moment that hopefully will never be repeated, where the world seemed to stop. And you just captured it so well.
Well, thank you very much. I think the uniqueness of that situation was for one of the first times, at least in my lifetime, not just everyone in our country, but everyone in the entire world was going through the same thing in the same moment. And the challenge was to not speak for, I can't speak for anyone other than myself. The challenge in that moment was to articulate the experiences as honestly as I could. I was a 26-year-old filmmaker who had left home at the age of 18 and I come from a very medical family. My dad is a doctor, my mum is a midwife, my big sister was a doctor, my stepmom is in health insurance. And the milkman was a poet. No, I feel like, I was this person in this family who wanted to carve out this different way. And all my family work predominantly for either a university or within the NHS. And so they don't know about starting your own business, as I'm sure you do, and these kind of things. And I was trying to be a filmmaker. And I'd left home at 18 and I'd said, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm going to figure out a way. And at the age of 26, my business fell apart. This feature film that we'd spent 3 years making, and we had a long festival run planned for it. We finished making the film at the end of 2019, after 3 years. And we were going to spend the entirety of 2020 going to film festivals. We managed to go to Raindance in the UK. We won the Moscow Film Festival for Best Director and Best Lead. And this was going to be my ticket in. I was convinced, 3 years of hard work was about to pay off, all the editing jobs, I've done so many jobs, bar work, door-to-door sales, all of it was about to pay off. And suddenly you're broke and you can't pay your rent anymore. And you're 26 and you have to call your dad and ask if you can retreat and live in his attic. And he says, you can, but you have to homeschool your 6-year-old brother and sister. And you gratefully thank him and say, of course.
Proper humbling.
Proper humbling, and then you're home and you're living once more in your parents' house, and you're grateful because you've got friends that are in real tight spots, whose income infrastructure has vanished, and you're trying to homeschool these guys, and you're trying to teach them maths that you don't even remember. And you're trying to make them interested in things that much more motivated teachers tried to make you interested in and failed.
Using your acting skills at that point?
No, 100%. And then after 2 weeks of realizing that, whatever Matt Hancock and Boris said about 2 weeks, 2 months, no, you start to realize, no, this is going to be a while, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna create a project. I'd never utilized social media before this because, as I said to you, it's all about live. you've got to be there
You
with
had
people,
no option,
but you've
right?
got no option, right?
Fair play, because you pivoted.
Right, so then I'm there and I think, okay, I'm going to start a channel, a YouTube, Instagram, Facebook channel where I'm going to make my poems, because you never stop writing. You know, if you stop writing, that's when I think my mental health would deteriorate. So I'm going to find a creative outlet for these poems that I'm writing about what's going on in the world. And I start this channel and, you know, quite honestly, I didn't know anything about social media. All I knew was that I like storytelling. And I really believe that if you can think and read and write and speak effectively, then you can do anything you want, you know, in whatever situation that is. And so I set myself the challenge of the pandemic was to find a way that, you know, the strangest of times, the most chaotic and unstable and fear-inducing of times could actually be hopeful. You know, that was the pandemic goal. And the fourth attempt to do that was this poem called The Great Realisation. And I remember I spent 2 weeks writing it and a day shooting it with my little brother and sister, guerrilla style. And, you know, you've got incredible filmmakers over here who are helping us make this podcast, 2 6-year-olds, not much of a crew. So I lit it with a baking tray full of candles because we didn't have nice lights like this. And my bedroom light is horrible. And I had a little DSLR camera and a microphone. And, you know, I mean, I'm sure your audience isn't interested, but like even getting that one single shot, it's putting a teddy bear there and pulling focus on the teddy bear and then running around and saying the whole poem and realizing that only half of your face was in, until finally this poem had been recorded and edited, and I put it, I released it, and before bed 50,000 people had watched this poem, and I thought that's incredible. You know, I've never spoken to that many people in my life. And then the next day it was 1 million, and then 5,
Within a day
and
it was
then
1 million.
10, and then more than 100 now, you know. And it was a surreal moment for me, because it was proof that actually, you know, we're living in an incredible time where, with a budget of nil, if you can tell a story that's compelling enough, you know, many people that you will never meet all over the world can you know, resonate with it. And that's
all the hard graft and all the training that had gone before that allowed you to be really good at telling that story as well. Even like when you mentioned the candles, when you're looking at it, they're flickering on your face. So you wouldn't have done that if you'd had all this incredible lighting and so on. So maybe wouldn't have had the impact. Mad, right?
Constraint.
Have you thought about this as well? That your whole family are academic in terms of doctors and so on, but the hope and the help that you gave 100 million plus people through pandemic was probably not equivalent to a doctor, different, but you know, still you helped so many people, which is what doctors are trying to do. I hope that rippled through your family back to you in some kind of, do you know what I mean?
Just like very nice thing to say.
Do you know
John.
what I mean? I hope I've made my point.
You silver-tongued flatterer.
Coming from you. No, do you know what I mean though? You set out to help people. Your mission to do the poem was to give hope. And you know, we both know plenty of doctors and so on. They're trying to help people and get people through. So, you know, that's sort of just an interesting way of, poetically way kind of looking at it, right?
Thank you. It was inspired by this phrase, right? The antithesis of hope is, when will we go back to normal? And, you know, no story works like that. You know, I don't know what Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Lion King, whatever it is you watch. No stories, the best of stories, they tend to go through 3 stages. Things are stable, and then they're unstable, and then they're resolved. You know, all of them. They're stable, then they're unstable, then they're resolved. And what does that mean? Stable means could be better, could be worse. You know, it's like Harry Potter has all these wonderful magical powers and talents, but nobody knows and nobody cares, and he lives in the cupboard under the stairs. It's stable. Then they're unstable. What does that mean? Okay, now there's a troll in the dungeon, there's a snake under the school, Voldemort's come, and everything is falling apart, and now it's really bad. And then it's resolved. And that's the final stop of any good story. And what does that mean? Well, that means that, you know, you've united with friends, you've been bold and courageous, you've been honest and true, you've overcome the adversity and you've put the world right, and now things are better than they've been, right? And it would be so weird to us if Harry Potter, if that's the franchise that you're interested in, if Harry Potter defeated Voldemort and then went back to live under the stairs. That's not a hopeful story, and you would feel very strange watching that in the cinema. And yet, in the pandemic, all anyone could talk about is we want things to go back to normal. What's normal mean? Normal is 2019. Okay, well in 2019 there were plenty of problems in the world, and I can tell you because I've been doing nothing but rhyming frustratedly about them ever since I was 14. You know, you've got homelessness, you've got a mental health crisis, you've got a failing schooling system, you've got a population that doesn't know what to eat, doesn't know what to think, is being censored, is being cajoled, you've got corruption, you've got all of these different things, you've got overfishing, pollution, climate change, everything. You've got all these things going on, and now there's a troll in the dungeon, and you'll take it all back. You know, you'll take all of that back just to get rid of this, and that's not a good story. That's not a good story at all. The better story is, okay, maybe we can come out of this and make things even better than they were before. And that's what I was trying to articulate with that poem. And we haven't even gotten there yet, because things are not better than before the pandemic. They're considerably worse, but it just means we're not at the end.
No, which is the whole the journey, no destination. But what's interesting as well is that there's the purpose. So if you use the analogy of dropping down to the problem, the troll, then Harry Potter, you have a purpose. And the purpose is to try and solve that.
Well, and the thing about stability is it's a prison, because you can continue in that state. You know, as soon as things become unstable, it forces resolution, because the alternative is capitulation and. Yeah. You know.
Well, look at you in 2020 lockdown, unable to do live, which you thrive on and live for. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
But there are. Terrible to say, there are people that will kind of pull the rug over themselves and they can't cope with it. You've got to pivot, you've got to keep moving, you've got to keep going. Sitting here right now, what is your purpose?
To be useful and to try and tell a better story than the last one I told. You know, to
always improve.
To try and tell the best story possible. Because
what are you working on now? What's Tom doing right now, or just done?
As well as poetry. And live performance. I'm actually working on a one-man live poetry show that I plan to tour around the country in 2025. Been working on that for 2 years, and it's going to be my first kind of poetry special. Like comedians make comedy specials, I want to create a live show that can be one person and a microphone, and can hold the attention of an audience and tell them a story for a continuous hour. And I've been working on that for some time, and it's nearly done.
That sounds awesome.
Thank you. But
as a 30-year-old inspiring youngsters into poetry, which you could argue is not as popular as it was, and social media dominating, I hope you succeed with that. That's inspiring, right?
Thank you. But then we were talking before this started about the filmmaking element. And there's this, I spent 2021 to 2023 making this film called The Spaceman, which you kindly watched the other night. Thank you. Which is all about anti-bullying. And it's about this little boy who is having a tough time in school, and he ends up connecting. We managed to get Colin Farrell to be in the film, little Woody Norman, Amanda Abington, most incredible cast. And I spent 2 years making that film, and then released it on my YouTube channel, and started to feel, filmmaking is very slow and very expensive. And so you almost think you pour all this effort, energy and attention into telling these stories, and you want to do a better job of distribution, because I've never done a good job of distributing a film. And the latest film, which is in post-production now, is called Sunrise. And I wrote this film because I met someone when I was in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2019, and I was flyering for a play that I was working on. And I don't know, have you ever been to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so 2,000 shows descend upon Edinburgh for a month in August. and the Royal Mile is packed with young, enthusiastic creatives trying to convince people to come and see their show. And I was there with a bunch of friends. Sorry, this is 2017. A bunch of friends from university trying to get people to come and see our show. And there was this girl walking down the Royal Mile with a banjo on her back, and like you do with everyone, I stopped her and asked if I could tell her a little bit about the show that I was working on, and gave her my 1-minute pitch, and she said, "I'm really sorry, not for me," and left. And lots of people do that. But about an hour later, I got a tap on the shoulder, and she was back, and she looked really emotional, and she said, "I'm really sorry. Can I speak to you, please, right now?" And I said, "Yeah." And I gave my flyers to a friend, and we went and sat on a pavement. And for about 4 hours, she told me her story. She grew up in South Africa in a difficult domestic situation, very unstable parents, and she ran away from home, and playing her music, playing the banjo, joined up with this traveling, I don't want to say circus, like this traveling show performing all over the world. And at the age of 15, really put her trust into these adults that were now her new guardians, and they had terribly and evilly betrayed that trust and that position of care. And she's finally, at the age of, I think she was my age, about 21, she'd finally left those people, and she'd found herself alone in Edinburgh, and had decided that this was going to be the time that she was going to do that thing that we all know, people who have taken their own lives, and very rarely are you confronted by someone who has made the decision that they're going to do that just before they do that, they want to talk to someone. And look, I was a young guy, I was 22 years old, and I've never had mental health training, I've never had suicide prevention training, I'm just there, I'm just listening. And I spent 4 hours talking to this complete stranger about effectively why, why despite everything that had happened, and every reason and every good reason why there was going to be so much more that could be,
try and give her hope,
right? And eventually the evening had to end, and you can't control, you can't know what's going to happen. And we swapped emails, and I said, please, if ever, she felt in a much better place. I said, please, she assured me that this wasn't going to happen. And I said, if you ever feel like this, can you contact me? And about 6 months later, I got an email saying she was back in South Africa, and she'd reconciled with her parents, and she was on a completely different trajectory that she didn't think she would ever find, and she thought that as a result of that conversation, only her direction had changed, but actually both of us had. I was fresh out of university, and I was so fearful of the fact that I didn't know where I was going in this world, and that I didn't know what it looked like to, forge a career in the arts, that I had accepted a master's in politics and journalism in the University of Melbourne. My parents had, convinced me that English and drama, which was my degree, was too vague. I needed to be more specific, and I'd accepted this master's. And the day after I met that girl, I called the university. I had my place and told them I wasn't going, because I had a really strong feeling that something more important for me to spend my time doing was to commit to trying to tell stories, trying to tell the best stories possible. And I wrote a story as a result of meeting that girl about two strangers, a cold calling scam artist who, is a leech on society and spends his time conning, elderly people out of their pensions, and ends up connected with a woman who is at the point of being about to take her own life, and for the first time in his life makes the, decision to be useful and diverts that course of action, because realistically most people don't know what to do in that situation, but through listening and empathy and and having a genuine human connection with people in a time that we're living in when actually connection is so rare and so difficult, can be very useful. And so that film is nearly finished, and the intention is to spend 2025 not just putting the film on YouTube, but to present it in as many situations as possible. And we're presenting the film in both corporate, creative, and public settings. 2 groups of people where we can show them the film, I can perform some poetry, and we can have panel discussion on what's just been watched. And so that is my goal for 2025.
Brilliant goal. I love the fact that it's come from such an inspired real life story. And I have to say, I was wondering where you were going with the story. I was hoping that it wasn't going to be a story where this girl took her own life. And I wonder how much of that therapy conversation that you had with her helped her. I mean, you'll probably think about that yourself, but how many people do reach out, whatever the connection was that you made with her on the fly, it's for her to come back and tap you on the shoulder. Fair play. She saw something in you that she could come and have a conversation that she needed to have. And she clearly didn't have anyone else. To flipping it to your film, like if that could open up people to be able to have the conversations they're not having, which I do feel that's happening more and more in the world of mental health. People are becoming, men are talking to men more than they ever did. We might have admitted that in football last night I pulled my hamstring, but I won't say I'm struggling with my mental health. I keep that locked away. Yeah. So a film like what you're doing in the corporate place, let alone in the kind of mass social media and so on, is only a good thing. It's just bringing that awareness that's needed through a skill of story making, which you're clearly awesome at.
I hope so. And it doesn't, as difficult as it is, it doesn't always go, the way we want it to go. My filmmaking, my best friend, Cameron, who he directed this film. I wrote it and I produced it, and he directed it. And the reason he directed it is because at the end of the pandemic, his ex-girlfriend of 4 years took her own life, and they'd been separated for they'd been broken up for a period of time, and she messaged him saying, "I really miss you." And that was it. And he, it had been about a year since they'd been together, and he thought it was just an ex-girlfriend thing, and he didn't know how to respond. And then, the thing that all of us hope that no one we love will ever do happened. And, I know by being his best friend, I know how much that message troubles him, because he feels what could have been if he'd had that conversation. I know that's, he shouldn't feel that way, because, you can't beat yourself up about these things. And yet, I know that he'll feel that. And so for all the instances of the times where that situation is avoided, there are too many instances of situations where it isn't. And so, that's why I love what you guys are doing here, with Just Ask a Question. Like it's incredible, because when I was in school, no one talked about that.
What I love is you're only 30 years old. And mentioned earlier, there's plenty of children growing up in a world of social media with really high impact. So they've got low tolerance, low attention span. If it hasn't grabbed my attention for 2, 3, 4 seconds, I've moved on to the next thing. My point being that well-delivered poetry, storytelling could have been a dying art. You've not only revitalized it, you're kind of thriving with it. What advice would you give with the sort of maturity and perspective you've got now and the experiences you've had to inspire a youngster looking to get into poetry, into storytelling?
Well, thank you very much for that. I guess whenever I go into schools, what I lead with is I'm not here to try and create 30 poets. I'm not trying to convince any of you to be what I am, because that would be nonsensical. And actually, one of the most beautiful diversities in this world is diversity of interest. And the fact that we do have people that are interested in engineering and music and virtual media and all of these different art forms that it's possible to be interested in. And so I say, I'm not trying to convince you to do what I do, but what I am trying to tell you is that your whole life is a story, and every situation you find yourself in is an element of that story. And honestly, I know I said it before, but if you can read and think and write and speak effectively, then you are unstoppable in any situation, whether you're navigating a complicated emotional relationship, or you're in a job interview, or whether you're making a presentation in front of colleagues, or whether you're making a speech at your wedding, whatever situation that you find yourself in life, if you can articulate yourself effectively, then it gives you power, but not power in that kind of corruptive, tyrannical way. Power in the sturdy way, power in the sense that you can stand on your own 2 feet and you can express yourself. And what's incredible is everyone in those classrooms has something to say, and most of them, you can play these little games, at the start you go, who has ever written a poem, and in certain schools quite a few kids have given it a go, but in most of the schools, particularly the state schools with less funding, you're not going to see many hands to that question. And then you go, right, okay, well, after I leave here today, you'll have all written one, and I don't care what it's about. I'm never ever going to tell you what to write about, but I'm going to take you through this process of how to go from blank page to standing up in front of people for the first time, potentially in your life, and expressing yourself, honestly. And, the first of these 4 stages, the first stage is always, what do you care about? Because you will actually find that people really, it can be anything. It can be a member of your family. It can be your favorite football team. It can be, I've heard some incredible poems about the Kardashians, or, honestly, one of the best kids' poems that I ever heard was, I went into this school, and at the beginning I said, what does everyone care about this girl? Put her hand up and said, I care about the Kardashians. And I kind of, more fool me, I kind of thought, well, okay, like, so what?
Yeah.
By the end of the session, this girl who had never written a poem or stood up in front of people and delivered a poem wrote, she's about 15 years old. It was this angry, like, rhythmic rap about, why the Kardashians were so foolish, because they should kick Kourtney out and let her in because she would make the most of the lifestyle, and she, and what was so incredible is all of her classmates were just sat there like this. And it didn't matter that there was almost, and she recognized it, there was almost an element of humor to the subject matter. It was the principle of saying, why, because I'm born into this life with these opportunities, am I not worthy of that life and those opportunities? And actually the core message of that poem is very deep. And it was incredible. And, the very simple truth is, absolutely everyone has something to say. They've got things that they care about. They've got causes that they're passionate about, things that they're interested in and that are bubbling away inside them. And all you need is for someone who doesn't take themselves too seriously, who's silly and self-proclaimed foolish, to go in and be like, listen, I think that's valuable and I think that should be heard. And I actually think that, if you applied yourself for the next hour, you could do a really good job of turning those thoughts and feelings and confusing ideas into language. And then one step further, I think that you should come here and stand on this spot and tell all of them why they should be interested too. And if you do that with enough people, then suddenly you find yourself in a situation which I think is the most desirable situation possible, where every member of our society is armed with the ability to communicate their thoughts and ideas. And what could possibly be more powerful, potent, effective than that, progressive? What could be better than everyone is articulate and everyone knows what to do with those tools, and they're not just fumbling blind because they think, oh God, the teacher's always telling me off because I can't sit and I can't make sense of organic chemistry, and no, because these kids are living in a world, they're being educated for a world that doesn't exist anymore. And they actually know so many things, and yet, the knee-jerk reaction is to say you're a bad kid, you're a bad student, and you don't want to do that. And some of the most unlikely pupils that I've met are the ones who have really expressed themselves in a way that still resonates, and that's,
I can tell.
yeah, that's so cool.
It's sad as well, just listening to you, because there's so much judgment in this world. Social media's got a lot to answer for with that, right? And that fear of putting yourself out there. The classroom used to be, or the audience used to be your kind of the audience. Now it could be so much bigger, which you can embrace. You can do incredibly well with the 100 million plus views for the Great Realisation. But there is also that whole the negative side of that is the bullying, the cyberbullying, and so on. But that's a separate conversation. I guess you've got to get past that. There's probably all sorts of things that come your way that you just have to not concentrate on. The 1,000 positive comments, and then someone decides to say something.
Don't read any of them.
Brilliant.
Even the positive ones. Don't read any of them.
Interesting.
There's no. That's what you should have friends for. That's why you need to have a group of friends. And what are your friends? They're real people who, you surround yourself with, and
they're giving you real-time feedback.
Real-time feedback.
As long as they're honest as well, right?
You stress test your worldview on your family and your friends, and and you're supposed to look for clues as to whether you're heading in a good direction or a bad direction, or whether you need to course correct. The problem with social media is actually, we're not supposed to foster an environment where people are terrified to be wrong. Because actually you can only be right if you're wrong a lot first. And
it comes down to failing and failing regularly to succeed.
And testing ideas. Yeah. This is what comedians do before they have a good joke. They go to open mic nights all over the country and they work it out. And you're supposed to do that with ideas too. And the problem with social media is suddenly we found a way for 15-year-olds to permanently publish unformed ideas to everyone forever. And suddenly they're 30 and their employer has found this thing that they didn't even understand and they didn't even know, and they're just you're just trying things, and that's a real downside, and we're gonna have to find a way to figure that out, and it's
well, it's the Wild West at the moment. But what I like is your way of managing that which is so inspirational, by the way, is to not read the comments, have a tribe of people around you that you can call on. I'll put one last question. So it seems to me like going back to the young Tom in school, the rap battles, that's spontaneous. That is proper sharp mind, brain, growing your vocabulary, growing your knowledge to be able to kind of thrive in that environment. But also then putting together a film like you've just done that's taken you 3 years of kind of tossing that around and kind of refining that to something that hopefully ends up being a masterpiece, if you know what I mean. So from the ad-libbing to the kind of, what do you enjoy the most?
I think it's wonderful to have, I'm very lucky that you've made this conversation about what I'm working on, but I know that you will have this as well in your life. Everyone has this. You've got long-term projects and short-term projects, and it's good to have both. It's good to be working on something where it's going to exist and then disappear, and it's good to work on something where you just have to chip away each day, until you get there. And I've always looked at film as very slow and expensive storytelling, where you've really got to commit to an idea that holds some emotional meaning for you, because that's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of people. It's going to take a lot of energy and money, and you're also going to have to convince many other people that it's worthy of their time as well, because you need sound recordists and DOPs and makeup artists and all these people.
Like the Spaceman, sorry to interrupt you, but the Spaceman, I couldn't believe the credits that came up.
Yeah.
Just like, and it's not like there's loads of people in the film.
No,
but suddenly I was sitting there, it was just like
50 people that worked on it. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, no, I was. You see, my problem was, and this won't take a second. After the Great Realisation, I found myself in a terrible situation for a creative to find themselves in, where I'd never had much money, and then I did a book deal for the Great Realisation, and for the first time in my life, I had some money, and I thought, oh my goodness, right now I can either put the deposit down on a flat or I can make a film, and I'm still renting. So let's just say
I love that answer.
Let's just say didn't get on the ladder, but I had the opportunity. You know, you have these small opportunities. I had an opportunity to make a film with Colin Farrell.
Following your passion.
And that was enough for me.
Following your passion. I think that your journey is all about the journey. I really do think, and that whole passion, purpose that sits behind it is, I can feel it coming off you. It's infectious.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for joining me.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.